Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at a species that, well, it basically rewrote the rulebook for freshwater ecosystems across two continents. We're talking about the zebra mussel.
Yeah, it's a fascinating and, frankly, alarming story.
And just to give you a sense of scale here, within only 7 years of showing up in North America, this one mollusk spread through 18 U.S. states and 2 Canadian provinces.
That speed is just incredible. And it's exactly why we're focusing this deep dive on a really key paper from 2002, Zebra Mussel, Impacts and Spread, authored by Dan Minchin, Francis Lucy, and Monica Sullivan.
Right, so our mission today is to unpack what this paper tells us. We're digging into the patterns, the rates of spread, and maybe most importantly, the ways humans basically rolled out the red carpet for Dordrecht polymorpha. That's the zebra mussel across Europe and North America.
And the paper has a special focus on Ireland, which was grappling with a relatively recent invasion at the time.
So why does this particular paper, this species, still matter so much?
Well, it's just such a perfect textbook example of a biological invasion facilitated by us, by humans,
Right.
by modern transport infrastructure, and the economic fallout, the ecological shifts, they're huge. Biofouling is the obvious one, but they really do alter entire ecosystems in temperate freshwaters globally.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. The organism itself, where did it originally come from?
Its native turf is the lakes and the slower rivers around the Caspian and Black Sea regions, also the Aral Sea, historically before its environmental collapse, low salinity areas too.
And what makes it so good at, taking over new places? What are its biological tricks?
It's got the whole package, really. First, they're incredibly fecund. A single female can produce up to 1 million eggs a year.
1 million, wow.
Yeah. Then second, they have this larval stage called a veliger. It's planktonic, free-floating for several weeks.
So it can drift.
Exactly. Carried downstream, pushed by wind and currents across lakes, covering huge distances before they even need to settle, leads to massive numbers settling far from the parents.
And the third piece, the one that causes so many headaches for industry.
That's their byssal threads. Like marine mussels, they use these threads to attach really firmly to pretty much any hard surface.
And that's the biofouling issue.
That's the biofouling. Pipes, boat hulls, intake screens, lock gates, they just get completely carpeted.
The paper also mentions they're pretty tough, environmentally speaking.
D. polymorpha is remarkably resilient. They thrive in alkaline freshwater, sure, but they can also handle slightly brackish conditions, up to about 5 PSU salinity.
What does 5 PSU feel like?
It's just barely salty to the taste. So it opens up estuaries, coastal lakes, a much wider range than purely freshwater species. There's mention, too, of D. bugensis, the quagga mussel, which might even be the same species, showing just how adaptable they are.
So the takeaway is, without humans moving them around, they probably would have stayed put in their home range.
Almost certainly. Their natural dispersal is limited.
But then we started building canals in Europe.
That was the first big step. Canal construction, starting around 1775, connecting river systems. The Oginsky Canal in 1804 was key, linking the Black Sea Basin towards the Baltic.
So they basically gave them a highway system.
Pretty much. A direct route into Western Europe. And we see the results. They reached the Netherlands by 1826. Probably hitched a ride on timber imports.
And Britain.
By 1924, they were in the Thames. Again, likely timber, maybe early ship ballast water. It was a slow creep, though. It took nearly 200 years to really spread across Europe that way.
Okay, now contrast that slow march with what happened in North America. 7 years versus 2 centuries. What made the difference?
2 factors, really. The vector and the geography. They popped up in Lake St. Clair, Michigan, 1988.
How'd they get there?
Almost definitely ballast water from ships crossing the Atlantic, likely from European ports where the mussels were already established.
Okay, so that's the vector. What about the geography?
That was the killer advantage, you could say.
Yeah.
The Great Lakes sit very high in the watershed.
So everything flows down from there.
Exactly. Once they were in the Great Lakes, the veligers just washed downstream into the Illinois River, then the Mississippi.
All the way down to the Gulf of Mexico.
All the way down. Reached the Gulf by 93. That massive interconnected river system basically gave them instant access to a huge chunk of the continent.
Which brings up something the authors flagged as potentially novel or at least deeply concerning. This idea of the invasion sort of boomerang.
Right. The LAS barge system. Later aboard ship. These are barges that can navigate rivers like the Mississippi, maybe picking up mussels in New Orleans. Then they get loaded onto a bigger mothership for the transatlantic journey. The mussels themselves can survive out of water in damp conditions for over 2 weeks, maybe 18 days or more.
So mussels adapted to North American conditions could potentially be shipped back to Europe.
Precisely, back to rivers like the Rhine or the Elbe, it sets up this possibility of a continuous loop, maybe introducing newly adapted, tougher strains back into Europe. Whole new ecological challenge.
Okay, let's pivot to the paper's main case study, Ireland. What was the story there? How did they track the invasion?
Well, the alarm bells really rang in 1997. A fish hatchery on the lower Shannon River had its water intake pipes completely blocked.
Blocked by zebra mussels.
Totally clogged.
Yeah.
But the researchers figured they'd probably been establishing for a few years before that, maybe since 93 or 94, likely starting in the Limerick docks.
And source.
The likely culprit was used boats, leisure craft brought over from Britain or the Netherlands carrying unseen hitchhikers.
And once they were in the Shannon system, how did they spread so fast through those big lakes, Lough Derg, Lough Ree?
The study points pretty directly at leisure boating, boats moving between lakes using the locks, the swing bridges. They just carried the mussels with them, and the timing was just perfect in a bad way. The peak summer boating season, lots of traffic.
Like when the mussels are spawning.
Exactly. Spawning kicks in when the water hits about 15 degrees Celsius, usually midsummer, so you have larvae in the water and boats constantly moving them to new locations.
Did they try to quantify how many mussels a single boat might be carrying?
They did. They looked at barges that had been overwintering in the Shannon system. These are maybe 20, 30 meters long. The estimated mussel load on just one of those boats leaving the system, it ranged from 14 million up to 40 million individual mussels.
40 million on one boat.
40 million. Just staggering numbers. It highlights why hull cleaning became such a critical message.
But the spread wasn't totally universal, right?
Yeah.
The study found a place they didn't colonize well.
Correct. Lough Allen. It's the highest lake on the Shannon navigation. It remained largely free of them.
What was that?
The water chemistry. Lough Allen's catchment area is mostly blanket bog, which makes the water more acidic. Zebra mussels need alkaline water, rich in calcium, to build their shells. So the acidic water acted as a natural barrier. It shows there are environmental limits.
Okay, so let's talk impacts. The so what of this invasion in Ireland. What did the paper find ecologically?
Well, the first big thing is water clarity. These mussels are filter feeders, incredibly efficient ones. When you get dense populations, the paper mentions up to 120,000 per square meter in some lakes.
180,000 per square meter.
Yes. They filter enormous volumes of water.
Yeah.
And the result, a measurable drop in chlorophyll levels, that's the phytoplankton, and a really noticeable increase in how clear the water looks. They fundamentally change the base of the food web.
But perhaps the most devastating ecological impact described was on the native mussels.
Absolutely. The native unionid bivalves, like the swan mussel, Anodonta, these guys live partially buried in the sediment, but part of their shell is exposed.
Prime real estate for zebra mussels.
Exactly. The zebra mussels settle on those exposed shells in huge numbers, incredibly dense clusters. They physically smother the native mussel, block its feeding, and eventually just overwhelm it with sheer biomass.
How quickly did that impact happen? Did the surveys show a rapid decline?
The data is stark. In the Shannon Lakes, Anodonta were apparently abundant in 1998. By 1999, they were still common. But in 2000, despite putting in more effort to find them, the researchers only found 3 living juveniles. 3.
Wow, so basically a local extinction event in just a couple of years.
Pretty much a functional collapse of that native population where the zebra mussels became dominant. It's dramatic.
The paper also mentions impacts on plants.
Yeah, they foul aquatic plants too. Submerged macrophytes, even reeds like phragmites. They measured up to 900 grams of mussels attached to a single reed stalk.
900 grams, that's nearly a kilogram.
Right, enough to make the plant leaves sink. But there's another angle. When these fouled plant fragments break off, carried by wind or currents, or even disturbed by birds or cattle.
They act as rafts.
Exactly. They become another vector for spreading clumps of mussels to new areas, a sort of natural redistribution mechanism amplified by the invasion itself.
Okay, let's shift to the human side. What were the big impacts on industry and just, people trying to enjoy the water?
For industry, especially anyone drawing water, it's immediate. Blocked pipes, intake pipes for treatment plants, factories, fish farms, just choked solid. Can even lead to tainted water supplies if not managed.
This for boat owners.
Huge hassle. The fouling on hulls creates massive drag, so fuel consumption goes way up. And worse, those narrow water intake slots on engines. especially inboard-outboards.
Mm.
They can get completely blocked by tiny young mussels settling in the autumn, just in the first year. That leads to engines overheating, potential damage. It's a real problem.
And there's a public health concern, too, for swimmers.
Yes, definitely. Where mussels settle densely in shallow areas like bathing spots, the sharp shells become a hazard. People wading or swimming get nasty cuts on their feet and legs.
Did they survey that?
They did. In July 1999 and 2000, they surveyed bathing groups. Around half the people in those groups reported getting cut, and cuts in potentially contaminated water raised the risk of infections like Weil's disease.
So faced with all this, what did the authorities in Ireland do? What did the management response look like, according to the paper?
They launched a big public information campaign pretty quickly, starting in 1997. Leaflets, posters, seminars, media coverage, targeted mainly at anglers and boaters.
What was the key message?
Pretty straightforward advice summarized in the paper. Things like, scour your boat hull regularly, wash it down, ideally with hot water, drain all the water out, bilges, engine cooling systems, live wells, basically check, clean, dry.
And did it work? The paper suggests it had some effect.
It seemed to, at least initially up to the year 2000 when the paper was written. They noted that no new lakes were known to have been colonized during that period.
Okay.
And they also observed that the amount of fouling, the biomass of mussels found on boats being moved between waters, seemed to be considerably lower. People were cleaning their boats more.
But the authors sound a note of caution, too.
Yeah, they acknowledge that keeping that level of public awareness and action going long-term is the real challenge. It requires sustained effort, funding, constant reminders. It's easy for vigilance to slip over time.
Looking forward from the time of the paper, what were the big remaining risks they identified? Where were they worried the mussels would go next?
Well, the underlying geology of Ireland, especially the Midlands, with all the limestone, means there's a lot of suitable water chemistry out there. So further spread seemed pretty inevitable.
Any specific high-risk spots they called out?
Lough Melvin was highlighted. It's particularly sensitive because it holds 3 genetically unique types of brown trout, the ferox, gillaroo, and sonahan.
What's special about them?
Unlike most trout, these distinct forms actually spawn in the lake itself, on the lake bed gravels, not in feeder stream.
Ah, so if zebra mussels colonize those spawning gravels.
It could directly interfere with trout reproduction,
Yeah.
a major threat to those unique fish populations. They also mentioned potential impacts on the pollen, a type of whitefish, in Lough Sturg and Erne.
So this brings us back to that global loop idea, the North American invasion creating new challenges that could rebound to Europe.
Exactly. The paper really drives home how interconnected things are. This species, Dreissena polymorpha, is incredibly adaptable, or plastic, as biologists say. Its success in North America might lead to evolved traits, maybe faster growth, wider tolerances. And then through something like those LAH barges, these new and improved versions could potentially find their way back to Europe, creating problems even in areas that had sort of adapted to the original strain.
It really makes you think about whether an invasive species journey ever truly ends. Or does it just keep adapting and finding new routes?
That's the final provocative thought, isn't it? The paper leaves us grappling with this cycle. Biosecurity isn't just about stopping the first arrival anymore.
Right.
It's about managing a threat that can potentially keep evolving and returning, potentially stronger, via the very global trade routes that moved it in the first place. How do you manage that kind of dynamic feedback loop threat?
A really complex challenge, highlighting the intricate links between global movement and local ecology. Thank you for walking us through this crucial paper.
My pleasure. It's a classic study with lessons that are still incredibly relevant today.